Here's your science news update from March 2nd, 2026. All right, so today we're going to be jumping from the vastness of space right down to the building blocks of matter. We'll also touch on some incredible new frontiers in medicine, and then we'll take a quick trip back in time to look at our planet's pretty dramatic history. Okay, let's dive right in, starting with a couple of major stories from space and cosmology. So first up, we're tackling one of the biggest puzzles in cosmology, something called the Hubble tension. Now, what is that? Well, for decades, scientists have been tearing their hair out over this problem. Basically, when they try to measure how fast our universe is expanding, different methods give them completely different answers, and that's a big problem. But there might be a solution on the horizon. Scientists have found a brand new tool. They're basically listening to the universe for a faint background hum. This hum is actually made up of gravitational waves from countless distant black hole collisions. The method is called the stochastic siren method, which sounds complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. Stochastic just means the collisions are random, and siren means they can use it as a kind of standard ruler to measure things. So how does it work? Well, the logic is actually kind of clever. It's all about what scientists don't hear. Think about it. If the universe were expanding more slowly, it would be smaller, right? And in a smaller universe, all those black hole collisions would be packed into a tighter space, making that background hum louder. So the fact that the hum is relatively quiet lets them rule out those slower expansion rates. It's a really neat way to narrow down the possibilities. Okay, so from the very edge of the universe, let's bring it way back home to our own solar system. There are some fascinating new findings about Jupiter's icy moons.
It looks like moons such as Europa and Ganymede might have been born with the building blocks of life already included. We're talking about complex organic molecules, or COMs. A new study suggests they were seeded with these right from the get-go. And what's really interesting is where they came from. The simulations point to about a 50-50 split. Half of these precursors for life were basically hitching a ride from the wider solar nebula, while the other half formed right there on the swirl of gas and dust around a baby Jupiter.
All right, let's switch gears now and look at some incredible developments in physics and material science.
This is a big one. For the first time ever, researchers have made light do something that only electrons were supposed to be able to do. They've made photons, particles of light, mimic something called the quantum Hall effect. Now, this is a Nobel Prize-winning discovery that describes how electrons, in really extreme conditions, drift sideways in these perfectly defined, predictable steps. But photons don't have an electric charge, so getting them to do the same thing? People thought that was basically impossible.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, because these steps that light is taking are tied to fundamental constants of the universe. They're incredibly reliable. This could lead to a new gold standard for making ultra-precise measurements. Plus, it hints at creating tougher, more reliable quantum computers that run on light. Speaking of materials, let's talk about solar energy. Scientists have just fixed a really critical flaw in what are called perovskite solar cells. This has been a huge roadblock preventing them from being mass-produced, so this is a major step forward.
So what did they do? They came up with this clever pre-seeding strategy. Basically, they lay down these tiny little nanocrystal seeds first. These seeds then act as a guide, helping the main perovskite crystal layer to grow perfectly from the bottom up. The key thing here is that it fixes tiny defects in a hidden layer of the cell that was causing all the problems.
And the results are pretty amazing. Using this method, they managed to create a mini module, which is way bigger than a tiny lab cell, that achieved a power conversion efficiency of 23.15%. That is really, really good. But here's the real game changer. You almost always lose efficiency when you go from a small lab cell to a bigger, mass-produced one. This new method shrinks that efficiency loss down to less than 3%. That is a massive step towards getting these super efficient solar cells out into the real world. Hey, if you're finding this update useful and interesting, it would be a huge help if you could take just a second to like and subscribe for more. We'll be back daily with more science news just like this. Okay, let's move on to our updates in health and medicine. First up is a whole new way of looking at Alzheimer's disease. For a long time, the focus has been on those amyloid protein plaques. But now, researchers have created the first ever complete molecular map of an Alzheimer's brain, and they did it without using any dyes. What they found is shifting the entire picture. It's not just a plaque problem. It's a massive, sweeping metabolic disruption across the entire brain, with huge changes in things like cholesterol and glycogen, especially in memory-critical areas like the hippocampus.
Next, in the world of cancer research, scientists have engineered a brilliant new nanomaterial that's kind of like a tiny, smart bomb. It's iron-based, and it's designed to use a tumor's own unique environment against it. You see, tumors are more acidic and have a lot more hydrogen peroxide than healthy cells. This nanomaterial seeks out that environment, and once it's inside, it kicks off a dual chemical reaction that just overwhelms the cancer cells with oxidative stress. It's a two-pronged attack from the inside out.
And the results so far? Honestly, they're pretty incredible. In mouse models, this therapy completely eradicated breast cancer tumors. Not only that, but it also prevented them from coming back. And the best part? It did all this without harming any healthy tissue or causing nasty side effects. Just amazing.
And finally in medicine, there's some really interesting news about metformin, a super common diabetes drug. A clinical trial looking at its effect on people with type 1 diabetes found something unexpected. Now, it didn't reverse their insulin resistance, which was the hope. However, it did something else that's really meaningful. It reduced the amount of insulin they needed each day by about 12%. For anyone who has to manage this disease, that is a significant quality of life improvement.
All right, for our last story today, we're going to travel way back in time, millions of years into Earth's past. Geologists in Brazil have just uncovered evidence of a massive asteroid impact from about 6.3 million years ago. They found the country's very first known tektite field.
So what are tektites? Well, they're these cool, aerodynamic bits of glass. When the asteroid hit, it melted rock and blasted it into the atmosphere, and these glassy fragments, which they're calling jarosites, are what rained back down. And get this, they found them scattered across a 900-kilometer area. That tells you this was a seriously massive impact, even though they haven't found the actual crater yet.
And that's all for this Science News Bulletin. We'll be back with another update in 24 hours.